Usually when we think about a biological threat, there's this expectation of something microscopic.
Right, like a virus or some sort of, engineered pathogen.
Exactly. Something where you need a totally sterile lab and an electron microscope just to perceive that you're even under attack. The danger is, like, inherently invisible.
Yeah, and it operates entirely out of sight, which generates a very specific, quiet sort of terror. But it lacks physical scale. Like, we don't see a virus physically dismantle a city block.
Right. But then you step into the world of this incredibly specialized team we've been tracking, and suddenly the biological threat isn't invisible at all. It is literally the size of a skyscraper.
And it is aggressively trying to destroy a massive piece of public infrastructure right in front of your eyes.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today, we are looking at Season 2, Episode 8 of the What Are the Odds case files.
The Great Succession.
Yes, the climactic series finale of the British Columbia arc. We're examining the incident reports, the tactical assessment, and the audio logs to understand how the behavioral probability unit had to stop a biological weapon that was quite literally crushing a colossal hydroelectric dam.
The sheer physics involved in this case file are just staggering. We are looking at a scenario where, biology, structural engineering, and tactical field work all collide in real time.
Under extreme duress, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have an audio log recorded by Agent Cross. The timestamp is 2:00 a.m.
And the location is the crest of the Silver Creek Hydroelectric Dam in British Columbia.
Right. And just picture this visual because it fundamentally breaks the rules of how the world is supposed to look.
Yeah.
You have a dozen thousand-year-old cedars.
Which are massive.
Ancient, massive trees. They normally take a millennium to reach their height, but they aren't growing straight up out of the soil. They're somehow growing entirely horizontally.
Leaning completely over the canyon walls.
Exactly. And their immense, heavy trunks are pressing directly against the concrete face of the dam.
Trees of that size simply do not grow that way naturally. I mean, they are anchored by gravity, right? They exhibit negative gravitropism to grow upward.
Right, and phototropism to grow toward the sun.
Exactly. So for them to grow horizontally, extending like these massive battering rams across a gorge, it implies a level of deliberate artificial manipulation.
Enter the unsub.
Right. The unsub in this case file, a man named Dr. Silas Thorne, known as the arborist, he basically managed to weaponize the forest itself.
According to the field lab analysis, Thorne used a combination of synthetic auxins and high-intensity UV lasers to completely hijack the growth cycle of these ancient cedars.
And auxins, for those who might not spend their weekends reading, botany journals.
You'll be discharged.
They're essentially plant hormones. They regulate growth, cell elongation, and how a plant responds to environmental stimuli.
But I have to imagine Thorne wasn't just walking around, like, sprinkling some high-end fertilizer on the roots.
No, not at all. He was inducing growth at a hyper-accelerated, terrifying speed by artificially flooding the root systems and the vascular tissue of the trees with these synthetic auxins.
And then hitting them with the lasers.
Right. Using UV lasers to provide a highly directional artificial light source, he essentially created a biological siege engine.
Because the lasers act as like a chemical throttle.
Exactly, pulling the growth continuously in one unnatural direction.
But wait, a bunch of big trees leaning on a dam shouldn't cause it to explode, right?
Yeah.
I mean, concrete dams are designed to hold back millions of tons of water.
Right.
So what makes the wood stronger than the water? I'm trying to wrap my head around the mechanism here. How does relatively soft wood actually break massive steel-reinforced concrete?
It's a fair question.
Is it, and tell me if the physics track here, is it like when water gets into a microscopic crack in your driveway and it freezes over the winter, expands, and completely splits the concrete slab, just, on an accelerated scale?
What's fascinating here is that the mechanical force operates almost identically to your ice analogy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's driven by aggressive cellular division rather than thermal dynamics. In the incident report, Corporal Gray points this out to Agent Cross right on site.
That the trunks are just a distraction.
Exactly. The massive trunks pressing against the face of the dam are just a distraction. The real attack is happening below the waterline.
Okay, so Thorne wasn't just targeting the trunks.
No, he was aggressively steering the root systems into the concrete. He was forcing a phenomenon the team termed root jacking.
Root jacking? That is such a terrifying concept.
It really is. Corporal Gray and Agent Cross observed that these massive, hyper-accelerated roots weren't merely growing against the flat surface of the concrete. They were actively seeking out and forcing themselves into the microscopic fissures of the dam's expansion joints.
Wait, but why doesn't the concrete just stop the roots? I mean, it's concrete. You pour it, it's a solid, impenetrable wall.
Well, a hydroelectric dam actually isn't one solid, continuous block of concrete. It's not.
No, if you poured a structure that massive all at once, the heat generated by the chemical curing process would cause the whole thing to crack and crumble.
Oh, that makes sense.
Plus, they endure massive fluctuations in temperature and physical stress from the millions of gallons of water pressing against them, so they're built in massive interlocking blocks.
Oh, I see, with expansion joints between them.
Exactly. To allow the structure to subtly shift, expand, and contract without shattering.
So these joints are a necessary structural vulnerability. They're designed to handle a few millimeters of thermal shifting, but definitely not a biological entity actively wedging itself inside and expanding.
Right. The roots act as literal hydraulic wedges. Plant cells, when they grow, generate what's called turgor pressure.
Turgor pressure.
Yeah, it's the pressure of the fluid inside the plant cell's vacuole pushing outward against the rigid cell wall.
Oh, is it the same physics that allows a tiny, fragile dandelion to push straight through like a 2-inch layer of city asphalt?
That is the exact mechanism.
Wow. In a normal plant, turgor pressure is simply what keeps a stem standing upright. But when you have thousands of thick roots, hyperstimulated by synthetic auxins, wedged deep inside a concrete seam.
It becomes a bomb.
Exactly. That turgor pressure becomes a devastating mechanical force. Millions of microscopic water balloons inflating with unstoppable hydraulic force.
And the logs explicitly document the physics of the situation.
Yeah.
It says if those roots were to expand just 2 more inches, the internal tension would cause a catastrophic z-axis shear.
A z-axis shear.
Meaning the dam doesn't just, spring a leak and flood the valley.
No, the structural integrity would completely fail along 3 dimensions. The immense trapped pressure of the roots, combined with the weight of the reservoir behind the dam, would cause the entire structure to violently explode outward.
Okay, so the dam is groaning, the concrete is microfracturing, and they're on the literal verge of an
The
explosion.
catastrophic one.
Right. Now, when I was reading this part of the file, my immediate instinct, and I'm sure it's what you listening are thinking right now too, was bring in the chainsaws.
Right? Just cut them down.
Yeah, call in the heavy equipment, rig some explosives, and just sever the trunks. Why let them keep pushing?
It seems like the obvious answer.
But the tactical assessment immediately shoots that idea down. It turns out to be the ultimate trap.
The problem lies in the physics of a coiled spring. The trees are pushing with incredible force, and the dam's structural integrity is pushing back.
So they're perfectly balanced.
Exactly. They have reached a highly precarious equilibrium of pressure. If you suddenly remove the trees by cutting the trunks, the dam's massive counterforce, all that pent-up energy in the structure...
It suddenly has nowhere to go.
Right.
The whiplash effect.
The sudden release of tension would snap the concrete backward, shattering the dam just as surely as the root jacking would. You cannot cut the trees down, and you cannot push them back.
So how on earth do you stop a biological battering ram from the inside out without altering the pressure dynamic?
It's quite the puzzle.
It really is. And this is where the cross-disciplinary brilliance of the Behavioral Probability Unit really shines. Eris, operating from the field lab, and Corporal Gray on the ground, had to synthesize a biochemical solution.
Right, because if the problem is hyper-accelerated growth driven by auxins, the solution has to be the chemical opposite.
So they developed an auxin antagonist, which the file identifies as a high-potency abscisic acid.
In natural plant biology, abscisic acid is the hormone primarily responsible for dormancy and stress response.
Okay.
When winter approaches or during a severe drought, a plant naturally produces abscisic acid. It sends a chemical signal that forces the guard cells to close their pores, halts water intake, stops cell division.
It essentially puts the plant to sleep to survive the adverse conditions.
Precisely.
So it's an instant chemically induced coma for the plant cells. It shuts down that turgor pressure dead in its tracks without altering the physical mass of the roots holding the pressure.
It's elegant.
And I love Corporal Gray's term for it in the comms log. She calls it biological concrete.
The goal was to freeze the trees exactly as they were, to turn the living, expanding cellular tissue into an inert, unmoving structural support.
Because if the wood rots, the tension releases and the dam breaks.
And if it keeps growing, the dam breaks. It had to be permanently petrified in a state of suspended animation.
But then they hit a massive logistical hurdle. You have this miraculous chemical coma sitting in a vat in the field lab, but how do you actually deliver it?
That's the real trick.
Right, the audio logs note that they can't just call in an airdrop and spray it from the sky.
No, the forest canopy of these ancient cedars is incredibly thick.
So if they drop it from the air, the leaves and upper branches absorb it, and the chemical never reaches the root tips buried deep inside the concrete where the actual damage is happening.
Exactly.
So if you can't spray it from above, and you can't get chainsaws near the roots, how do you get this acid to the actual points of contact?
Delivering a payload under these conditions requires lateral thinking. They needed the abscisic acid to reach the very tips of the roots inside the expansion joints. So, Eris and Corporal Gray working together, they realized they didn't need to pierce the dam from the outside. They could use the dam's own anatomy against the trees.
They turned the entire dam into a giant syringe.
Basically, yeah.
I was completely thrown by this when I read it. I had, no idea massive dams had internal plumbing.
Oh, they do. Large hydroelectric dams have extensive internal cooling systems. Networks of pipes run throughout the concrete.
Really? Why?
Because when a dam is built, the chemical reaction of the concrete curing generates massive amounts of heat. If it isn't cooled from the inside out, the concrete will crack before it ever sets.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
And once operational, those same pipes sometimes help manage the heat of the turbines. Eris and Gray managed to tap into this internal network.
To turn it into a giant needle to sedate the forest.
Exactly. They injected the high-potency abscisic acid directly into the dam's cooling system, completely flooding the internal structure.
So the roots, which are aggressively seeking moisture and expanding deep into the dam, naturally encounter these flooded cooling pipes.
They breach the pipes and, driven by their hyper-accelerated metabolism, they actively drink the abscisic acid directly into their own vascular systems.
That's amazing.
They use the unsub's biological weapon, the aggressive root expansion, to deliver the antidote to itself.
That is just brilliant. But of course, nothing is ever that simple for this team. There is a massive tactical catch.
Oh, I says.
The trees are still being aggressively driven to grow by the artificial stimuli that Dr. Thorne set up on the cliffs. And the abscisic acid isn't magic, right? It needs time to propagate through the cellular structure of something the size of a skyscraper.
It needs a full 60 seconds to take hold and trigger that dormant state.
And during those 60 seconds, if the artificial stimuli keep pushing the trees to grow, the concrete will still shatter.
Right, because Thorne wasn't just relying on soil chemicals. He had set up localized high-intensity UVB laser arrays hidden deep in the cliffside foliage across the gorge.
Artificial suns.
Exactly. Plants exhibit phototropism. They naturally grow toward the light. The UV radiation essentially acts as a steering mechanism.
It forces the auxins to accumulate on the shaded side of the stem, right?
Yes, causing those cells to elongate faster and bending the plant toward the light source. By placing these intense UV lasers at specific angles, Thorne was chemically fueling the trees and then steering them with the light, driving them relentlessly toward the face of the dam.
So we have this incredibly tense scene documented at the North Cliff Overlook. Agent Hatch and Jax are trying to deal with these artificial suns.
And Jax locates 6 of these high-intensity UVB laser arrays.
But here is the trap. Jax discovers that the lasers are slaved to a localized, hardwired mesh network. If Jax uses his usual technical wizardry and tries to hack the network to shut them down, the system has a failsafe.
A very nasty one.
If tampered with, they are programmed to strobe to maximum power, dumping a massive final dose of phototropic radiation into the trees.
That failsafe would cause an instantaneous growth spike, shattering the dam before the biological concrete has time to set. It is a classic catch-22.
You have to turn off the light to save the dam, but touching the light switch blows up the house. So the high-tech path is a booby trap. How do you flip the switch without touching the network? What is the low-tech solution?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this moment perfectly encapsulates why the behavioral probability unit is so effective. It is the perfect marriage of biology, physics, and tactical fieldwork.
It really is a great visual of high-tech gear meets low-tech solution.
Hatch and Gray realize they don't need to hack the network or destroy the hardware. They just need to break the line of sight. They deploy tactical smoke.
But not just standard military smoke. The incident report specifically notes they were laced with silver iodide particles.
Silver iodide is traditionally used in meteorology for cloud seeding to induce rain. Its crystalline structure provides an excellent surface for airborne moisture to cling to.
Right.
But when dispersed in a dense tactical smoke grenade, those highly reflective microscopic crystalline particles do something else entirely. They create an impenetrable barrier to directional light.
To blind the lasers. The visual described in the logs is stunning. Hatch and Gray blanket the cliffside in this dense, silver-laced smoke. The smoke doesn't just obscure the lasers. The crystalline particles physically scatter the highly focused UV beams in a million different directions.
It breaks the artificial sunlight.
Deprived of their directional beacon, the mutated trees lose their phototropic drive. The aggressive, directed growth suddenly stalls.
The chemical engine of the auxins is still running, but the steering wheel has been violently removed.
I love that analogy.
And that sudden stall provides exactly the 60 seconds of grace Eris and Gray needed for the abscisic acid to work its way through the root systems.
I can't even imagine the tension on that dam. You have millions of tons of water pressing on one side, thousands of hyper-accelerated roots pushing on the other, the concrete literally groaning under the strain.
And the roots are inside the walls drinking the antagonist, and across the gorge, this heavy silver smoke is hanging in the air, scattering these intense laser beams.
And then, equilibrium.
Just like that.
Yes, as Elias Vance documents in his final log, the tension just evaporates. Vance notes that the internal pressure sensors inside the dam slowly began to drop. The turgor pressure inside the plant cells neutralized. The biological concrete had set.
The visual Vance describes in the aftermath is haunting, really. The massive cedars didn't retract, they didn't fall into the gorge.
No, they're permanently dormant.
Frozen completely horizontally across the canyon walls, locking the dam into a strange, reinforced embrace. He calls it a permanent wooden monument to Silas Thorne's madness.
Wow.
It is a stark reminder of how close they came to total structural failure.
Well, the dam integrity is officially stabilized, and Dr. Silas Thorne is in custody. But beyond the wild mechanics of the case, we really need to celebrate this victory, and I want to make sure we give a warm shout-out to the human element here. Specifically, Corporal Gray.
Oh, absolutely. Her inocuous pivot between botany and tactical deployment was instrumental at every level of this operation.
100%. And the log notes that she actually stays behind at Silver Creek to oversee the slow, painstaking, and highly dangerous removal of all that frozen timber from the concrete face.
It was quite the cleanup job.
But before the core behavioral probability unit team leaves to head back to the States, there is this wonderful specific detail. Gray gives Agent Hatch her RCMP challenge coin.
That is a deeply significant gesture. A challenge coin in law enforcement and military circles is a symbol of immense respect earned through shared adversity.
It really highlights her new bond with Agent Hatch.
For Corporal Gray to hand hers over to Hatch after such a tense, high-stakes operation is the highest form of praise. It speaks to the intense bond forged when people have to rely on each other entirely to survive a seemingly impossible scenario.
It really grounds this massive, almost science fiction level threat back down to the people on the ground putting their lives on the line. It's easy to get lost in the lasers and the hyper-accelerated botany, but it ultimately came down to two people throwing smoke grenades on a cliff edge.
I think if we look at the broader relevance of this case, it highlights something critical for all of us to consider. It demonstrates the terrifying power of biological forces when they are manipulated.
Because we are so accustomed to thinking of nature as something passive, right? Just a green backdrop to our built environment.
But this case proves that with the right catalyst, natural growth can become an unstoppable kinetic force. Furthermore, it underlines how absolutely vital cross-disciplinary thinking is today.
Oh, for sure.
A pure tactician would have tried to blow up the trees and subsequently destroyed the dam. A pure botanist might not have figured out how to use the dam's internal cooling system as a delivery mechanism.
It required chemistry, structural engineering, botany, and tactical strategy, all working in perfect synchronicity to solve a complex asymmetrical threat. So what does this all mean? It means the victory belongs to the behavioral probability unit. Nature, aggressively weaponized and unnaturally accelerated, was brought to a standstill. The dam holds.
The massive horizontal cedars are nothing but a monument to a foiled plot.
The team packs up their gear, the British Columbia arc concludes, and they head back to the States. Case closed. Except, well, the universe rarely lets this team rest, does it?
No, it seems they barely have time to process the physics of one statistically improbable event before the next anomaly requires their immediate attention.
Exactly. Because just as they're winding down, Jax flags a new anomaly. And this one is a puzzle that I guarantee will keep you up at night. The anomaly is located in New Orleans, Louisiana.
A completely different environment, moving from the freezing ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest to the humid sea-level basin of the Gulf Coast.
Humid is an understatement. According to Jax's flag, New Orleans was experiencing a severe, heavy rainstorm, a massive flood event, basically a hurricane.
Right.
And yet, during this torrential downpour, 3 separate victims were discovered. They didn't drown. They were found perfectly mummified, desiccated in less than an hour. Every single drop of moisture was somehow violently pulled from their bodies, leaving them as dry, brittle husks right in the middle of a waist-deep flood.
It entirely contradicts the fundamental environmental reality of the situation.
It's physically impossible, which is exactly why they are getting the call. What are the odds a person can be mummified in the middle of a hurricane? The behavioral probability unit is heading to New Orleans for a case of instant desiccation. Keep your umbrellas close. See you next time.